Good evening. Welcome to another episode of Edge of the Rabbit Hole. I'm Mike Ricksecker, Hard Rogue Media, along with Vanessa Hogle, my co-host, and Shana, our chat Shananigator. So you will see her down in the chat room, taking care of you guys down there. Tonight we are back with Lee Ehrlich. We had him on a few weeks ago, and of course we had him on last year, back when we were a radio show. But we had a great investigation this past weekend. He's going to talk about some experimental paranormal techniques that we actually tried there, and really tap into his mind. He's a really creative guy, got a lot of great ideas. Of course, you know him from all of his paranormal diving and Master of the Abyss, his book. And so I call him a paranormal explorer because it's kind of pretty much what he does. But up first, before we get into all of that, we have a giveaway. And if you recall from last week, I announced that we were doing a giveaway for our 250,000 views. And that giveaway, gets 250,000 views, is Encounters with the Paranormal. It's the first volume, and a ghostie. So we can find out who wins it. And actually, this is my ghostie, so you're not going to get this specific one, but you'll get a ghostie. You get a signed ghostie from Shana and I. So we've got a hat full of names here, as you can see. A lot of people put in for this, so I'm really happy about that. Here we go. Put it on my head so I can't see. Here we go. Here's the winner right here.
I love it.
Sean Gilmore, Ectovision Paranormal. All right. We had them on, what was it, about a month ago? All right, Sean. You'll get your ghostie.
That was not live, so you didn't cheat.
Yeah. No cheating there. So Sean, very cool, very cool. We were very happy to have them on. That was a great episode. Talking about a number of different things about their techniques and how they do their investigations and their technology and all of that. So all right, Sean, just shoot me your address. I'll touch base with you if you're not on live tonight, and I'll get you your ghostie in the book. So we'll have more giveaways coming up here. We're going to do it for 3,000 subscribers. So by all means, if you haven't already yet, please go ahead and subscribe. But for those of you that already have, tell your friends about us, share us out, and bump us up there. We'll do that 3,000 subscriber giveaway, and there'll be some other lucky person to win some stuff here. And somebody out there is saying I look tired, and it's you. It's you, isn't it? Yeah, I know it's you. Okay. All right. Well, without further ado, and so is Vanessa. Vanessa's tired too. I'm pretty sure Shana is too. We're all tired. And Lee drove a whole bunch of miles, so we're all tired tonight. But we're still gonna have a great episode. So
we sure are.
Yeah. So without further ado, I want to bring Lee on the show. Welcome, Lee, and you can refresh people a little bit about who you are, and for our new viewers, let them know what you do, who you are, all that great stuff.
Well, hi everybody. I suppose you can call me a paranormal adventurer explorer. I own the Ghost Pros franchise, and I've been paranormal investigating for over 30 years. I'm also the team leader of the Paranormal Divers, which is the world's first and only underwater paranormal team. And in addition to that, I explore all around the world, and I'm an adventurer. I'm always looking to see what's beyond, sort of beyond the the fence, so to speak, or on the other side. So no matter where we go, we poke around and try to scare something up, and you meet people and have adventures and find things that nobody knows about. And that's what it's all about with me, is just exploring and learning. So that's who I am. And we had a heck of a lot of fun on the way, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely a lot of fun, and we had quite a bit of fun this past weekend. You had come down there with us to, out there with us in Illinois, Mineral Springs Mall for the event at It's Raining Zin, the Haunted Tomes and Tales, and then you investigated with us as well at the Goldenrod Showboat. So what I wanted to talk with you about tonight is some of the different experiments that you ran while we were out there, and maybe even some more that you might have in mind. It's a little bit what you tried a little bit different than the norm. I have a couple of clips here. You and I didn't have much of a chance to speak before we got on air. But I have a couple of clips here. We're not going to be able to hear them, you, me, or Vanessa, but they're going to be able to see and hear them. And we're going to start with the water EVP, where we were at the in that hallway, and that fountain was going down the hall, and we were hearing voices and getting EVPs that way, something a little bit different. So we'll start with that, and then we'll get into how you set up your own little experiment as well. So let me go ahead and start that clip so everybody can see. And okay, here we go.
Go ahead and speak to us. You can use the water.
There we have it.
Now he's speaking right there.
I just heard that.
Okay, you heard. Okay, that's the sound.
Is that what I think I heard?
And you'll hear it on the recorder when you play it back.
Let's play it back.
I heard
Yeah, I
that.
heard that.
Did you hear him?
That's what I heard.
That's
Okay.
it.
All right, so that clip, like I said, we couldn't hear it. At least probably like what in the world he just played for them. But basically, that was us being able to actually hear voices off the water, and the audio recorder did pick it up. So, Lee, can you kind of explain how that works? How you can actually capture EVPs from babbling water?
Sure. Well, those who have investigated with me in the past know that I use water exclusively to capture EVPs. In fact, I don't do any EVP work at all without water, because the results are so great with water. Doing it the other way just doesn't yield anything really worth listening to. Now, I know you're probably saying, huh? It really is like that. You see, what I do is I run a white noise source that has a certain sound. It has an interrupted, sort of a hollow, random sound to it. And what happens is that there has to be a hollowness behind the sound. Now, you're probably thinking, well, what does that mean? Well, what I do is, it's sort of like making a waterfall. And while you are hearing the sound emanate from the pool where the water is landing, there's also a hollowness behind the waterfall. It's sort of an emptiness that absorbs some of the sound, and you'll hear muted gasps and moans and different sound coming from that hollow area. So what I do is I run a sound source a room or so away from the area that I'm sampling. I don't run the source in the haunted room. I run it next to the haunted room. Now, of course, there might be a ghost in the haunted room, but usually it's not the sound that's directly coming from the fountain I'm listening for. It's the sound that we can hear 15, 20, 30 feet away. So what I do is I run this water sound, and it sort of emanates throughout the area, usually around a corner. It can't be direct. It has to be muted and somewhat subdued. And then what I do is I take a regular digital recorder, and I just set it down on the ground, maybe, in that room that's nearby, a room or so away. Close enough that you can hear all the dynamics of the sounds, but not so far away that you can't hear anything. And then I just let it run for 15 or 20 minutes, while we answer questions, or rather ask questions that you normally would during an EVP session. bearing in mind that a lot of times you're just sort of asking those questions to animate the room. The ghosts rarely answer what you ask of them. They've got their own itinerary.
Yeah.
So anyhow, I ask some questions, and I sample about 10 or 15 minutes worth. Then I take that recorder and I download it into my personal computer, and I'll upload it onto a sound program, any of the Sony programs like SoundForge, or you can even use like a free downloadable like Audacity. And what I'll do is I'll enhance the feed. For example, instead of looking on the baseline at your normal height, I'll make it maybe 64 times larger than normal. And what I do is I look at the graph, because sound is visual too. You can see the sound on the graph, and that's really important. Because there's a point where you look for the sound rather than hear for it. Because if you're doing an investigation all night long, you're not going to sit there with headphones listening to hours and hours of footage. That's just a complete waste of your time. You're better off seeing the words and just zooming in on them, once you learn how to see them rather than listen. So what I'll do is I'll zoom in on it, and I'll sample a little clip where there's sound. Now, what'll happen is that it's piggyback sound. It's not just voice speaking, it's voice on sound. So you have to be able to listen to the sound and pull that voice out. You've got to be able to discriminate what's being said and whether or not it's speech at all. So what I'll look for is like that statico kind of a breakup that you see in human speech, where there's linguistic change in the sound, similar to stops and fricatives and different sounds that a linguist would recognize in speech. I'll see those on the graph.
Sure.
And what I do is I hone in on those, and then I enhance it either through different buffering programs or different amplitude settings on the like Fletcher-Munson curves and things that audio files know about. And I get in there and I kind of just clean up the sound a little, and lo and behold, I get great runs of audio. Now, to give you an example, the first time we tried this was in a home in Estero, Florida. And what happened was I actually stumbled upon it by walking into the home, and it sounded like the TV was playing in the back room. And this was this was the prelim of an investigation. And my case manager and I were sitting there with the family, and I said, hey, who's in the back watching TV? And they said, well, nobody's there. That's the ghost. I was like, what? No way. Because, it sounded like Walter Cronkite doing the news. You could just hear it, It was almost like Vin Scully calling the Dodger game. It had that sound, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, no way. This is just rambling speech. I mean, the people rambled worse than I do, So anyhow, I'm listening, and I said, this is crazy. So I walked in the back room, down the hall, and what I encountered was a fish tank in these people's bedroom. And it had evaporated about 2 inches off the surface, and there was a babbling, there was a pour-over type of filter just making that perfect babbled, muted sound, with the lid closed and that hollow area between the water surface and the lid escaping out the back where the cutout was for the filter. So I'm thinking, wow, there's voice coming out of this thing, but it doesn't sound like voice when you're near it. It sounds like voice from 2 rooms away. So I go back 2 rooms, and I toss the recorder down on the couch, and I said, humor me. I said to everybody, let's just sit back and, we called out some questions. Hey, who's there? Is anybody down there talking to us? Who's back there? Blah, 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 blah. Next thing you know, about 10 minutes of that goes by, and I stick my trusty recorder in the SoundForge, and I'm listening. And it's babbling and babbling and babbling and babbling. And all of a sudden, you hear it like, blah, 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 blah. And then the voice, just like that, like a little sing-songy thing. And then the voice goes, I just can't stop the seizure. And I go, what?
Yeah, you heard that within the water.
Oh, and I mean as succinct as anything, just like a whisperiness, but like it was like a hollow, like and then it goes, I just can't stop the seizure, like that, and then it goes babble, 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 babble. It says 9 cancers, babble, 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 babble. Then it says, she says it's hard to be them, just like that. So I'm like, whoa, this isn't something like, your typical Class A EVP where somebody goes, no. It's not that garbage, okay? This is somebody talking to me, like straight up talking to me.
Right.
And I'm like, whoa. Okay, well, now let's jet forward a decade or more. It's all I use. It's all I use is water. Now,
so
there's
hang
different
on,
ways to get...
just a second. I do want to answer a question that came up in the chat room. Woody in the chat room was asking about the specific EVP that we played, the clip that I played. And that is going to be an EVP that we feature on the Paranormal Roads video that will be coming out about our Mineral Springs investigation. So stay tuned for that. Yeah, on that clip, because you're basically getting a video of us going through the audio, you're not actually getting the specific audio clip off the recorder. So we'll give all that on that Paranormal Roads video. And we just got back from traveling yesterday, last night. We haven't had a chance to go through all the audio and everything, but you'll get all that in that upcoming video. So just wanted to let you know all that. So, sorry, Lee.
I have to add something here.
Sure.
Just to let you know that Donna Boxbaum is saying that YouTube keeps erroring out, that she's actually posted that onto our Edge of the Rabbit Hole page. So I've sent her a message and asked her if it's doing better now. Just giving you a heads up. Real quickly, before you continue on with that line of thought, I have a twofold question for you, just real quick, because it's based on that. One is the type of situation that you're talking about with the water and the airspace in between it. Would that be a similar situation, or like if somebody was in water with a canoe over them? Where they have
absolutely.
Because that's what I'm wondering about there. And real quick before you go on further, you talked about the linguistic aspect of it, and women and men have inherently a particular cadence that they speak.
Absolutely.
And so is that is it easier for you to tell when you're visually seeing the language on what I can only see as like an EKG thing, where it's going up and down? Are you able to tell before you listen to it what the cadence is like and whether you can peg it as male or female?
Well, not sex specific, but you can see the cadence as human speech. I can see the speech on the line. I don't even look anywhere else. I know where it's talking. And it's interesting, it's sort of a cultured, it's a cultured, what do you call it? Experienced sort of process where you have to learn what it looks like and what it sounds like to be able to hear it. For example, I'll play these bits for people and they'll say, I don't hear anything. And I can't not hear it. Okay? And then what happens is, as soon as they catch on to as soon as their ears cancel out all the extraneous background noise and they just listen to the meter or tempo, or the tempo of the line, all of a sudden they're like, what the heck? And sure enough, like for example, interestingly, my friend Chris Moon, he's one of my best friends. My friend Chris Moon does voice box work. He's famous for that. And Chris hears the exact same thing on his voice box that I hear on the water. He hears these patterns of voice, these skipping, trailing patterns of voice, and he knows the cadence and he knows the tempo, and he can tell right away when it's speech and when it's not. Whereas other people listen to it and go, I just hear a bunch of sound. But there's times where I'll be listening to Chris's stuff, I'll go, there it is, man, right there. You hear it? You hear that word right there? And he's like, dude, I hear that every time. Nobody else does. So, he's doing it on the box. I'm doing it on the water. The point is this. It's the same voice patterns using a media to be heard. Now, Vanessa, you asked about the canoe. Fascinating. People come up to me and say, they'll ask questions like, they'll say, well, I got in my house the other day and I closed the garage door, and while it was folding down, the power door, while it was closing down and I was bringing in the groceries, I heard someone speak. And I'm like, yes! That's one of, like, I would say, like a handful of my favorite noise generators that people will hear voice on. For example, the hollow in the garage as the door comes down. Classic haunted house phenomena. The sound of the vents, or in the vents when the AC kicks on in the house. That hollow area. And here's a favorite, and you guys out there, tell me you haven't experienced this. That hollow hissing that happens when the toilet refills itself because it's leaked a little bit of water, out. You know how it'll, every once in a while it just hisses and refills the tank?
Wait.
How many times? You know what I mean?
Are you saying you get an EVP off of flushing the toilet?
Absolutely. Well, you can get an EVP. Yes, yeah. No, well, it's actually the refill. But
right.
You can get an EVP. You can get an EVP, and a really good one, off of that hollow hissing sound as it refills the tank. And it's fascinating.
Interesting.
People will hear that a lot. Like, they'll say they're in the house and they heard like what sounded like a voice in the back of the room, and they go back down there, and all that there is the hissing of that tank. So, I mean, I'll pull them out of a lot of places, but there has to be a hollow.
Right.
And
Well, it makes sense, Lee, what you're saying when you said that you have to put the EVP recorder within close enough proximity to hear something, but not too close. And that makes sense because the reason that I was seeing the canoe is because it's a commonly known fact that if somebody is in water and they've had their boat or whatever turned over them, it's almost harder to hear them the closer you are to them. That their voice actually will carry in the water. And
yes.
It's easier to hear them in a larger parameter around the canoe than it is right up closer to them. Do you understand what I mean?
Oh, yeah, well, that's, yes, and that's because sound travels in a sine wave. It travels in a, in a wave type pattern, like down and up, like a rolling swell would in the sea. And that's why, for example, when you're out at sea and you're using communications, your VHF radio will go maybe 14 miles, pretty much line of sight. But if you're traveling across the Atlantic, for example, and you want to call somebody in England or in the States, you've got to use SSB, single sideband. And what you've got to do is you've got to bounce that wave from the water surface to the atmosphere and then some back and forth like a ham operator would do. So you have areas where the sound is strong, and then you have areas where the sound is waning because it's at the top or peak of the of the wave before it builds to another crescendo on the way down. So with water, sound travels, I would say 5 to 8 times faster underwater than it does on land. And of course, there's density issues with water where sound actually skips on the water. Sound doesn't go from the surface down to below. It has to penetrate that water, and it's tough. So, yeah, you're right. You've got to be a certain distance from the hollow. You have to be just about that perfect spot where that wave is going to be in the mid-run, where it's got the most flavorful amount of sound possible that hasn't been bled off or sped up in any way.
So you have to know how to monitor the crescendos and the diminuendos. You have to know kind of what you're looking for.
Absolutely.
Well, Lee,
Absolutely.
I'm going to give the audience, our viewers, an example of you trying to set up a water experiment, and maybe you can kind of explain how, in this kind of, home method that the water and, the crescendo and the vibration of the water and the waves work with, trying to be able to pick up audio.
Sounds good.
So this is you in that bathroom.
Okay.
So you fill the thing up all the way.
Use the drain now.
Okay, so that was real quick. It was just kind of spliced together a couple of snippets of that. But yeah, so you were filling up that cup, and then you're just kind of angling it right so you can get the babbling sound going on.
Right.
So how is that?
Well, Well, what happens, one of my favorite ways of making the sound that captures voice in anyone's home is in the sink. Now, I prefer to do it in the kitchen sink because the sinks are deep. I also prefer to do it in a bathtub because the bathtub is deep also. But the other night, of course, we were sort of flying by the seat of our pants,
Right.
and what we ended up doing was in a sink like the one we just saw in the video example. You've got a shallow area. The sink was maybe about 10 inches deep, which can work. So what I did was I took a jar and I filled the jar with water and I placed it in the sink, partially covering the drain so that you still have the hollow of the drain. Then I turned on the babbling water out of the spigot so that it would dribble dribble into the top of the open jar and make a babbling, slapping sound. The problem was that every time I tried to turn the knob on the faucet, it gave a predictable, steady stream of water. In other words, it wasn't interrupted, which is what you want. You want a stream where it drips, like a fast babble, then slow, flop, 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 blip, 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 flop, flop, blip, blip, blip. You want it to break up.
Love the
like
sound
that.
effects.
You're like, hey, I work on those hard. I just practiced them before the show.
Nice.
So, people think I'm crazy. Everybody else is hunting ghosts, and I'm going, bloop, bloop,
Right.
bloop. Somebody's got it, right? Okay. Anyhow, so it's got to have that interrupted random sound, because remember, this is completely random. Okay. For example, every word we utter is uniquely different in its sound properties, right?
Sure.
So if it's just blip, 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 you're not going to get anything, because the only thing you'd ever get is a word that sounds like a blip. Okay? But remember this too, and this is the key when you learn this. There's a little industry insider trick here. Listen to this sound, like blip. Okay? It's not the BLI part of it. It's not the P part of it. It's what's after the P. It's like a second P, like blip. You hear that? It's the p after it. So, these words, it's like we'll go babble, 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 babble. Like babble, babble, babble. It speaks like that. It speaks quickly on the leftover energy of the word. So it's as if somebody's over your shoulder finishing your sentence for you. And you have to listen on the end of these words. So it'll be like, it speaks almost in an echo of the word, or rather the sound that's heard. And that's where you need to listen. You need to listen and look on the graph prior to and after the word. And what I tell people is this: ghosts are rude. Okay? Ghosts speak when you're speaking.
Sure enough.
They don't speak on a flat line. I can tell you this with pretty much steadfast assuredness. If you're picking up an EVP on a flat line, it's not spirit EVP. Okay? It's some type of contaminant or sound from elsewhere. Ghosts just don't talk on the flat line. It's not like that. There needs to be, well, I'll give you an example. We don't synthesize sound. We create sound through air escaping from our mouths, right?
Right.
We don't just go from a flat line to making synthesized sound out of the blue, nor does a ghost. A ghost has to have some type of energy or sound wave to modulate. And since they don't have a corporeal being with a tongue and a palate and all of those things, they need to use the sounds made by other sources to speak. And that's why lots of people say that they hear, they'll hear somebody whisper, like they'll close the car door. And they sit down and close the car door and they'll hear somebody whisper behind them. Or situations like they've got the ceiling fan whirring up there and they'll hear somebody whispering on the ceiling fan. But you don't just sit there in a dead, flat, silent room and hear somebody speak. It's different. It's usually like You stand up and you're shuffling around, and just as you stand and your feet shuffle, you hear someone
Yeah, that's
whisper.
when you hear it. Right.
Okay, now, a lot of times, nobody ever, I mean, rarely, they never think back to what precipitated that sound. Like, they'll say things like, oh, well, I stood up. Well, that's great, you did stand up, but that's not what made the sound. What made the sound was your shuffling feet. And the thing is, we are the noisiest creatures when we're not speaking. For example, people are always making sound. If you do a video of somebody sitting there in a room by themselves, they're not quiet. People make sounds all the time.
No, and that's why it's so hard when you get a big group while you're investigating for you to be able to really, hear what's going on other than everybody else moving and shuffling and, Shana's demon stomach or whatever,
Oh, well, people are, well, yeah, I mean, I listen, it's a hobby of mine to listen to soundtracks and do EVP. I mean, years ago, I used to be called the EVP guru before I picked up the title of the paranormal diver. And all I did was analyze people's EVPs. They'd send me EVPs from different groups around the country, and I'd analyze them. And some of them are the most simplistic little sounds that we all make that we don't realize, like squeaks, and people will almost purr sometimes, and they make the squeakiest sounds, and their stomachs growl, and they don't. It's not, and then you'll get an EVP, like somebody will squeak, and somebody goes, "Oh, that was Grandma's voice," and you're like, "Oh my God."
Yeah. Donna in the chat room is asking, so how hard is it to hear them over the top of the water sounds? And Shana answered that it was surprisingly easy, and it actually is. Once you understand what it is you're looking for, because, Lee, you gave us kind of a crash course right there on the spot, and once you explained to us what it is you're listening for, it was actually fairly easy to, to catch those words and almost whole sentences. We had to go back through the audio to figure out exactly what was said, but, we could distinctly hear those voices.
And you guys did a great job of recognizing that. You see, that's the thing. A lot of people don't recognize it. They say, nah, all I hear is water. And you know what? That's great, because it's, that's what makes it a horse race. It's not for everybody, okay? But if you can hear the sound, like you and Shana did, and I'll tell you, Shana picked it up right away. She was on it. She could listen to Chris's voice box and she'd hear the same darn sounds we do. Okay, and other people are standing there with a look on, scratching their head, hearing nothing. And you heard them too, Mike.
Oh, yeah.
So did Chris. Where, like Vanessa, you should have seen. I mean, this fountain was speaking, and every single time it had a run of sentence, Shana would hear it. Okay, so here comes my big point that I would say, like if there's any investigators out there listening in who are new to this or even been around, are looking for some tips, here's my big tip. It isn't important what the ghost says. It's important that it's saying it. Okay? People will say to me, well, gee whiz, I can't quite understand what he was trying to say. That's not the point here. The point is that somebody was trying to say something who wasn't in the room.
Right, somebody's trying to communicate.
Hello?
Sure.
Hello? That's your evidence. Your evidence isn't a clear, grammatical, perfect English sentence. Your evidence is the fact that somebody other than whoever else is with you has got something to say.
Well, yeah, but personally, I would like to know what it is that they're saying, because one of the things I'm always trying to do is figure out if they have a message that they want to give, if they want to tell us a little bit about themselves, about the history of the location, whatever. I'm always trying to go a little deeper. So I'm interested in what they're saying.
Yeah, that's where I have to butt in and say that's not the case for me, because the reason I'm there is to try to bring closure if at all possible. And I can't do that if I don't know what they're trying to get me to pass along. But I also do understand where you're coming from, that in the beginning, just knowing that they're there.
Right.
That stuff can come later, but just knowing that they're there, recognizing it.
Yeah, well, exactly. Exactly. I mean, we do the same thing. There has to be closure. But the thing is, just for the sake of contact, or rather, maybe I should qualify that by saying, just for the sake of ascertaining whether the place is haunted, the fact that there is voice to me, is indicator enough. You know, like if I'm to the point where I'm nitpicking what the guy's trying to say, and it's somebody that's not in the room with us, then I know that place is haunted, because you know you're hearing a ghost's voice that isn't around, right? So
Right. But sometimes I don't think we're trying to discern whether the place is haunted or not. I think sometimes we already know it's haunted, so we're taking that extra step.
Yeah, but like I said, so anyhow, it's kind of neat. It's
Yeah.
just neat that, you know, so, and also too, the darn things babble a lot, you know, and you'll get lots of different words at the same time from different people talking, and which brings us to the Overlord issue. Now you guys know what I'm talking about because you've been in the game forever. Chris and I talk about this, where there's this voice that I call Overlord. It's a booming, deep baritone male voice that can be heard everywhere you go. Now you're probably thinking, huh? Yeah, it's creepy, okay? You'll hear other spirits or ghosts or whatever they are talking to you on the water, and then Overlord comes around and shuts them all up. Like he starts to speak, he speaks over them. It's a biting, raspy, demonic sounding voice, and they run for cover. It's kind of reminds you of like when Carol Ann was in the light and that one voice was overrunning the others. Now I asked,
who's the Overlord?
Well, I asked Chris about it, and he said he hears it too, and he knows exactly who I mean. And I've identified Overlord in his recordings, and he says that's him. Well, it's one of those draw your own conclusion things. There's people who think it's the devil. There's people who think it's something different altogether. But I can tell you, and this is on the fringe of sounding weird, he knows me, and he knows who I am, and he knows when I hear him, because he reacts to me, which has got something to do with, which has a lot to do with Master of the Abyss.
That's what I was about to just say. Are you talking about what you were discussing about in your book, Master of the Abyss?
Well, it's not him.
Okay.
But it's not him. It's something that knows I'm onto him.
All right.
And he doesn't like it.
So you think he's coming through trying to quiet down the others that are communicating with you?
They usually do. They usually do. He comes through and it's kind of like the kids have had enough time to run around and play, and now he comes out and calls them in for dinner, that kind of thing.
Right.
But it's harsher than that. It's as if you know, the ghosts are saying what they want to say before he comes around, and then he catches wind that they've crossed over, and he shows up and he comes to give them a spanking, and they all hide. That's how it seems to work, because once this voice starts booming, the session's over.
Okay.
It's just over. He overrides anything else that has anything to say. And so a lot of times when I listen to these recordings, I'm not only listening, of course, just like you guys, I'm listening to specific keywords to be able to ask more questions later. Because, you know, you establish contact, then you take what you've learned and you ask questions pertinent to the words you heard, and you try to milk something tangible out of the conversation. But
in the chat room, Jarrett Osborne is suggesting that it's a gatekeeper.
Oh, very much so, Jared. It could be. All I know is I don't know what I'm talking about. Okay, I'm an expert at not knowing what I'm talking about.
Right.
Okay, you know,
we all are.
I'm the world authority on not knowing what I'm talking about. Okay, with that said, I have these little inklings and I have these theories, but of course, because it's like, you know, it's like talking through with a mouth of whipped cream, you know, I don't exactly know. You know, like my ears are full of foam and whipped cream, and I'm trying to tell you what somebody just said, right?
Right.
So really, Jarrett, you're probably right. You know what? Any theory that is you know, like that makes sense is possible. It's definitely someone or something of an authoritative position, either self-imposed or otherwise, that sort of cracks down on the, on the communication, that kind of thing. And once he starts in, that's the end of that.
Yeah.
And so, okay, also too, how many times have you guys noticed when you're using a Ouija board or a spirit board, how there's that point in the conversation where all of a sudden the damn thing just starts going wild and you know somebody else is there who just effed up the entire session?
Well, I don't use a spirit board, so.
Yeah, but it's like somebody, and then people say it's demons.
Vanessa,
well,
Vanessa could probably chime in on all that.
What do you think?
I have in the past used them. I prefer not to now because, hello, vegan, okay? I don't need any help in that department, especially for the nasties. But no, I do know what you're talking about. And it does make things quite uncomfortable. I know now what you speak of. I did not, when I was using one, understand at that point what it was. I now know all too well what it is. So I see where you're coming from.
Yeah, it's not something, when you're used to walking on that side of the fence, it's no problem at all. It's just like taking out the garbage. But when you're not, if you're someone who's easily swayed by, negativity and things like that, of course, not us, but others, he's not a guy that you want to mess with, because it's a voice, it's a commanding, authoritative presence that you don't want to mess around with unless, you're commanding yourself. And, but it's weird. But anyhow, when you guys do listen to these EVPs, you will hear this voice at some point. It'll come across loud and clear. And once it starts barking, because it has more of a barking, kind of a high-pitched wave in its voice, once it starts in, it's like having a shark show up and all the bait fish go away. You're better off coming back later on when the waters have calmed down a bit. That's what I find.
Well, moving on a little bit here, because it did come up earlier in the chat, and I do eventually want to get to the experiments that you were running on the goldenrod. I have the clip there, but it came up, since we're still at Mineral Springs, kind of wrap that up, and Jarrett mentioned it, and Shana also mentioned it as well, the Vortex that you caught. I know you posted the video earlier today on Facebook, so I wasn't able to get that clip and put it on here because I just ran out of time. But so basically, what you captured on the camera there was the moisture and everything moving upward off the floor. So kind of, you want to explain how the vortex is working there? I know Chris Sutton was there. He kind of backed up that happens right there in that area.
Well, we were in the basement, or the sub basement of the Mineral Springs
we're
Hotel.
5 levels down.
It was. You just can't explain how creepy and cool it was unless you were there.
Yeah, we're in the bowels of the thing.
I was smitten with it. Wasn't that not the coolest time?
Oh yeah, it was very, very cool. The old spring was down there, and then they still had the hooks up there from when it was the meatpacking plant, and then the water bottling from when they were bottling the spring water. But yeah, it's like way down there. It
was. And there
I actually have a picture of the, let me bring it up here. I think it's, nope, not that one. This one. I didn't label it correctly. I have the picture. There it is. The picture of the doors leading into that room.
It was great. That when I saw those, on my Facebook page, on the Lee Ehrlich Facebook page, there's a couple of videos if you guys haven't seen it. And I've got a nice video, about a 3-minute long video of the catacombs that you're seeing here. And there's another one about 1.5 minutes of the Vortex. Now, we assembled at the doorway that you see here, and then we walked inside and, sampled the room a little bit. It was really neat. And I was kicking around off behind the group, and I started noticing that there was a rather marked upflow of moisture moving past my camera. and I had my camera on streaming, and it had I could see everything it was filming, and you could see it was all lit, so you could see the particles flying. But what was weird about this was it wasn't following like anything that you would call like a direct flow of air. For example, in order for there to be airflow coming from the left to the right, there needs to be a source where the air can get in. The room isn't a vacuum where all of the air has rushed out and there's nothing. There needs to be a way for the air to get in. Well, that's not what was happening here. There was rising air all around me, like a sort of a circuitous, sort of a funnel-shaped vacuum all around, or upwelling of mist. But everywhere around me didn't have any mist at all. There was no mist going up the stairwell, which would have indicated that was the exit route. Nor was there mist coming into the room, which would have been its origin. It was coming out of the ground from my feet. It was like an upwelling of air was percolating up through the ground and blowing past me as if I was standing in a little whirlwind on the side of the road. And it was fascinating.
Yeah, since I didn't have time to grab it, the viewers after the show, go to Lee's Facebook page and watch that video. It's really, really very interesting. And you know what? We had a very similar experience, on the Golden Ride in the middle of the showroom when we got there. That same effect was happening, and Chris got that on his phone. I'm hoping that he ends up uploading that. I think, if I remember correctly, I got behind him with the video camera and got that. So I think it's kind of interesting. We were experiencing a lot of Vortex action this particular weekend, and I don't know, maybe Vanessa, maybe you might be able to answer that, if there's something with the seasons, with the moon, if there's anything that plays into that with vortexes.
First, a question: when you guys were doing this weekend, when you were down in that basement area, did one of y'all get like a really bad headache?
Well, you look like you have a really bad headache right now.
I do. As soon as you started talking about that, with that thing coming up around your feet, like right here, it fucking hurts. I'm not gonna lie to you. The only time that I've dealt with what you're talking about, when you're talking about the swirly, like the mist type thing coming up, the only time I have actually dealt with that has been when it has been a negative entity. And pure, not like devil or demon or something like that, but just another level of evil. And that's how it draws its energy. And it's like it's literally coming up through the earth and just kind of doing that little, like when you take the dish soap and you put it in the mason jar with the water and you shake it up or do whatever and it gives it a little tornado thing.
Yeah.
That's what it looks like.
Okay.
So, sorry, damn.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Looks like something, it feels like something just whacked the crap out of the top of my head. So, I'm alright. Y'all go. Okay. It's okay.
Right. Well,
yeah.
Since we kind of segued into the boat, then let's go ahead and move on to the boat, because we're already down to about 12 minutes left in the show, and so we did pick up a bit of a vortex action in the middle of the boat, and then Lee was setting up his experiment there. So I'm going to play a wiring clip, Lee, of you setting that up. So again, we can't hear it, but they will be able to.
I want to get you doing this, because this is not stuff that people usually do.
Oh, okay. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm basically making a little tethered receptacle that will show whether or not there's any power. In this case, it'll be DC coming through the line. That's the same corrosive ionic pulse that would eat away, say, an old-fashioned outlet where you had like copper and zinc touching or something like that. So I'm just betting that we've got corrosion like crazy going on in this ship because the ship is corroded to hell.
Right.
So what we're going to do is we're going to tap into that corrosion and see how much power is coming out of it. Now, ordinarily, one tiny piece of corroding metal might not make any power at all. because it's just a little tiny piece.
Right. You got a whole hole worth here.
Yeah, tons of corroding metal all stuck together with all these different galvanic issues going on, then perhaps the hull itself may be alive. And if that's the case, then we may actually be able to get whatever is here knocking around on this ship, i.e. the ghost. It may have a power source that it can use to manifest, or we may even be able to use it in a communicative way.
All right, a little bit of a longer clip there with Lee kind of explaining what he was doing with the wiring. And yes, Andrew, I am tired. Kind of talked a little bit about that at the beginning of the show. And Vanessa, I hope you're feeling a little bit better. I wanted to stop talking about that so that maybe that went away on you. So, Lee, can you give a little bit more detail as far as what it is you're trying to do there and trying to tap into the energy of the boat? One of the things I thought was really interesting with this setup this weekend was that the boat was actually sitting in the water because the rivers come up so high. This is probably the first time in almost 2 years that the boat has almost entirely been in the water. So can you kind of give a little bit more detail as to what it was you were trying to set up there in how you're trying to use the boat?
Yeah, well, what I was trying to do was I was trying to see whether or not the hull of the boat itself had any electrical energy in it, or even an action potential where ions were running across throughout the metal of the hull. And basically, the way you can do that, well, you can do it with a continuity tester, or you can hook a light up to the ship and see whether or not you can turn on that low voltage bulb. Well, never having seen the ship before, my plan was to find the generator, find where the wires of the generator fed into the circuit, the fuse panel, and basically I was going to short those fuse leads into the hull itself and see whether or not the hull could electrically supply the fuse panel, okay, with milliamps. We're not talking about voltage, we're talking about milliamps. And then I would have a light coming out. I was just going to plug a little test light into one of the receptacles in the ship to see if the light would come on. But since the boat had been stripped of all of its wiring and internal infrastructure, there was no way to do that. So we had to go to a secondary way of doing things where I basically tried to short, using DC, not AC, tried to basically establish a hot and cold lead on the hull of the ship in the hopes of catching some electrons as they were passing on by. But of course, it was a little, it's tough to get that kind of power through an extension cord because, you're the longer the cord, the more ohms there are present and the more of a draw you have on the circuit. And oftentimes, what electricity you started with is gone on the terminal end. So we had to improvise, and we took a cord and we basically grounded a cord to the hull, hoping that a portion of the hull that would ordinarily be negative would actually be a positive lead, which can happen. Now you're probably saying, well, how the hell is that possible? Well, here's what I discovered on sunken ships. You've got similar metals. When you build a ship's hull, it's not like these metal panels they don't come out of the same foundry. Some of them come from Eastern Europe, some of them come from Mexico, wherever they come from.
Yeah, you're talking about a hull from the 1920s, so who knows where it all came from.
Yeah, and back in those days, just coming out of World War I, you would have, metals of unknown nobilities, brass and copper and bronze and all these things thrown in with metal, with iron. Right. This is iron. This isn't steel. This is different. This is pig iron. And basically, that stuff, when you weld two plates together with a welding rod that's made out of a completely different substance, it's probably mostly zinc, you've got so many different nobilities to these metals that you've got action potential, which is basically ions flying back and forth, which creates electricity. Now, if you place these ion soaked soaked metal in salt water, then effectively you're doing what you would do inside of a lead core battery. You're taking the sodium and potassium ions and you're speeding them across the grid and you're creating electricity. That's what you're doing. Well, the showboat was in freshwater, and we didn't have the huge ion generator that we would have had in salt. Now, that's not to say that there isn't galvanic transference across the gap in those plates. But for us to really get that to work next time around, especially because I've seen the boat, we're going to have to find a weld on the seam. We're going to have to scrape some paint away, and we're going to have to stick 2 little clip leads on either side of that pig iron weld. And that may just give us a little bit of voltage. And if I can wire it up right and run the lead short enough, like maybe 6 inches on an 8-gauge wire, I'll be able to get that bulb to light up. But
that would be interesting. Oh, we did. No, I didn't. I love the theory and where you are going with that, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on right after that investigation, was because you're doing things and trying things that other people aren't. A lot of people just run into an investigation. It's like we got a couple of meters and make the thing light up, and you're actually constructing these long wires and tapping into the actual structure itself, which is very, very cool. Other people aren't doing that.
Well, it's fun to do these things, and also too, and I think this is important, interaction with the spirit realm. It's a two-way street. You have to show some interest in communicating and getting to know these things, and I find that through the things that we did, like the experiments you and Shana had set up, and the things I had set up. It shows those on the other side that we're really willing to stretch it to get to know them. And sometimes when you're setting up these elaborate experiments, someone just taps you on the shoulder, and it's this way of going, "Hey, good try, dude. You're actually really trying to talk to us."
So Donna Gordon's is asking, so basically you're testing to see if there's measurable electrical activity to feed the activity there, and I think that's a lot of what you were going for.
Yeah, but I was also, absolutely, without a doubt, I was also going to see whether or not we would be able to get the ghost to utilize that power, to use that light in a flickering manner to communicate with us.
Yeah, that additionally.
That's what I was hoping.
Right.
Now, next time, I'll tell you, next time we go, I'll tell you a little preview on something I'd like to try. See, because this time we didn't have a power source. We couldn't bring our own power source to the boat. But next time I'm going to use the inverter, so we'll have some power. And this is what I'd like to try. That big theater, which is basically, that whole giant area where the performers used to be?
Yeah,
the area where the orbs are? Well, here's an idea I have. I've got a small TV that I told you guys about that makes white noise. It's a cathode ray tube TV. It makes white noise. And what I want to do is I want to go out and get a roll of copper wire, just a thin gauge roll of copper wire. And I want to roll it, I want to run it along the floor, up one wall, across the ceiling, and down the other wall. In other words, make a giant square box out of this wire. A big box, 30 feet tall, 50 feet wide, etc. Then, I want to run this wire back into the port where you would screw in rabbit ears on a television. So I basically, because if you look inside rabbit ears, all it is a piece of copper wire. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to make a gigantic square antenna inside of the hull of that ship, in the hollow. Then I want to turn on that white noise TV screen, and my guess would be that if anything crosses that realm inside that square, that's electromagnetic in nature, its image would show up on that TV.
That would be interesting. You mentioned a little bit about that before, one of the times that we talked probably a couple months ago. So that would be a really interesting test. We have to start winding it down, though. Our hour is up. So, Lee, I really got to thank you for coming back on. And Vanessa, I hope you're feeling better.
I am.
Okay.
I
Okay.
hope so.
I've heard about you there.
I gotta say something really quick.
Yeah.
Vanessa, your hair looks beautiful. I know you're growing it out. It looks beautiful.
What is it with the hair lately?
Yeah, Mike, I don't know about your hair, Mike. I don't know about yours, but hers is beautiful.
I don't know.
Thank you.
They were talking about my hair last night on Dave Scott's show on Spaced Out Radio, yeah, there was
No, you look
something.
great.
There was something. There was something about hair yesterday, and I can't remember who it was, but somebody had PM'd me last week about Vanessa's hair, and so she couldn't believe that. But yeah, I don't know, something about hair lately. Go figure.
I guess, but I tell you, she's rubbing her head, and you guys, and I'm looking at her, I'm going, God, her hair looks great. Her hair just looks the hell with the headache. Her hair, look at her hair.
Thank you.
So
That's what
Joanne
happens.
is
Yeah,
asking
that's
me if I use the Ghost Box, and actually, I stay away from the Ghost Box. I've used it, from time to time, and for one, it gives me a headache. All that white noise gives me a headache. But what I have found is that a lot of times with the Ghost Box, we're just picking up that feed from the radio, and that's why I'm really actually this past weekend liking Lee's idea about getting the EVPs and using water like a Ghost Box, because then you eliminate all the radio possibility. So, and I've worked with people in the past that would sit there, they'd have a couple of different Ghost Box devices and not getting anything off of the one. It was pure static. We'll toss that to the side. We grab this one. It's like, oh no, we're getting a little bit of radio feed, and so
See,
I just
the beauty of those, if you're going to use one, use it with somebody like Gwen. She was an EMT and a police officer.
Uh-huh.
She can recognize what is actual feed from a police radio or the
Right.
regular radio, something like that. And she'll like, nope, that's not it. Nope.
That's
Nope. Now that's somebody.
That's why it's so important. Yeah, everyone. I guess everybody has their, their weapon of choice, so to speak. And sometimes things that we use and really gravitate toward tend to just really, you find something that works for you, and that's your game changer.
right.
And I know, yeah, like some folks, for some folks the box doesn't work at all. Other folks, it works for them. Some people like water. Some people do photography. And I think the wand picks the wizard in a lot of ways.
Yeah. There you go.
And so and all of us too. I think that's what makes what we do really cool, is that there's 1,000,001 different weapons available to us, and we got to pick one to take out into the out in the bush with us. And so you cozy up to your favorite choice, and that's your go-to bait, so to speak.
Right.
Your confident bait.
Pencil and paper.
Hey, yeah,
There you
it's
go.
well, everybody. The beautiful thing about doing this as long as we have is you really start knowing what works for you.
Yeah.
And it's a long-term study. You can't just. It's not like it's like bass fishing. Just because you didn't get a bite means you just keep grabbing a different kind of worm. You gotta work a worm a while and a pattern a while until you learn about what it takes to make that work. And it's like anything. The more you use it, the more you learn about it.
There you go.
That just struck me as funny. I'm sorry.
Well, good to see you laughing.
I'm so tired.
Oh, that's fun. All right, so let's wrap it up. Let's give some shout-outs. We've had a lot of people in the chat tonight. So, of course, Shana, thank you for everything you've been doing in the chat this evening. Love you. Robert White from Australia, thanks for dropping in. And you finally figured out the right time. That's awesome. Fran Molino, Diane Hilbert, thank you for always dropping in. Joanne, thanks for your question. Snaggletooth, it looks like you're getting a lot of your questions answered by Shana this evening. That's fantastic. Linz, thank you once again for joining us. Andrew, of course, I know you probably really enjoyed all of the Goldenrod conversation. Who else do we have here? Donald Gorton, of course. You did ask some questions. We appreciate that. Beat 3 Airspace, thank you. Who else do we have? B. Davidson. He says he came over from Noreen's channel. That's awesome. We love Noreen. Yeah, a lot of people that watch the Marine Show have picked up on this as well, which is awesome. Who else we got? Ex-group Home Kid, thank you for dropping in.
Love that name.
Of course, Gwen was in. Gwen was in here tonight. Jake Medford dropped in. Wow. All right, Jake. He randomly threw in there. He has a generator for the boat. Yes, you have a generator for the boat. Thanks for dropping in, Jake.
Very good.
Carrie Parrish, thank you for dropping in as always. Hope you're healing up. And I think that's going to be about it. Oh yeah, Jarrett Osborne was in as well. And thank you for your feedback. Tammy Sifford, thank you. And Tammy's a great support. And Tammy Heitzman was in earlier too. I remember seeing her. And I think that will about, because I'm just continuing to scroll up. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us this evening. And again, congratulations to Sean Gilmore for his winnings. We'll have another, like I said, we'll have another drawing or giveaway here at 3,000. And we don't know what that's going to be yet. Also, for the third Encounters with the Paranormal book, we are taking submissions for that right now. Vanessa, you have anything written up yet? Any ideas? You submitted something?
I will. I got you covered.
Sean and I will, of course. We already do have a couple of submissions already. Penny Scott sent something in, and I'm forgetting the other girl's name right now. But we do have a couple of stories in already, so that's great. It's on its way. We will have a special announcement about the third book coming up. The second one, if you recall, part of the proceeds are being donated to the restoration and preservation of the Goldenrod Showboat. Well, we're going to be doing something similar with number 3, but I'm going to hold off on that announcement just yet. But we already have that in mind. That's in the works, and we'll let you know what exactly that's going to be coming up here. Give you something to look forward to. So, Lee, again, thank you for coming out tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you,
for
everybody.
a wonderful weekend.
Mike, Vanessa,
Yeah. How can
Shana,
people find you?
Thank you all. Thanks to everybody out there, and it's always a pleasure, and you guys are the best.
Yeah.
Thank
Hey,
you.
how can people find you? Plug your book.
Oh,
Yeah, you got to do that.
my latest book, Master of the Abyss, A Journey into the Unknown, is, of course, by Haunted Road Media.
There you
It's
go.
on Amazon Kindle. It's a bestseller. If you're looking for 13 really, really neat stories, paranormal adventure stories, and cryptologic oddity adventure stories, and stories from a time when there were monsters to be found and monsters to be caught, and things running free that will make you cover your head at night. So grab yourself a copy. Everybody loves it, and there's something in there for everybody. You know, it's not a ghost hunter book. It's a book about what is really out there and what you can find if you look just a little bit beyond the hedge line. So, it's food for thought, and it hits home with a lot of folks in ways that they can relate to. So, Master of the Abyss, A Journey into the Unknown.
Yep.
Please grab a copy.
Great book. Great book. I thoroughly enjoyed all the stories within there. Also, if you don't have your ghostie yet, get your ghostie. OnRoadMedia.com. Go to the shop. Get your ghostie. Because we're not going to have a giveaway for a little while, and we don't even know what that one's going to be yet, so you got to go get them now. Any last thoughts, Vanessa?
You better hold on to one for me when I come on the 20th of May.
I will personally hand you a ghostie.
Okay.
All right.
I'm going to put you to it. And don't scare the shit out of me when I'm there, okay?
Oh, okay. All right, everybody. Take care. You have a good night. Till next time.
Good night, everybody.